Have you ever sat in a quiet house, feeling both the freedom and the weight of living alone? At first, it feels like a victory, a well-earned chapter of life where you finally get to do things your way. No one to tell you when to eat, how to organize your space, or what time you should go to bed. The house is yours. The silence is yours. But over time, that silence begins to settle in, not just around you, but inside you. They don't tell you about that part. Before we continue, friends, I kindly ask you to subscribe to my channel. It only takes a second for you, but for me, it's an extra motivation to keep creating videos. I'd also really appreciate a comment. Thank you for your support, and now, let's continue with the story. Mark was the kind of man who spent his life looking forward to retirement. He had worked tirelessly, raised a family, and always dreamed of the day when he could wake up without an alarm, enjoy his morning coffee at his own pace, and finally have time for all the little things he had put off for years. At first, he loved it. The first few weeks were filled with a kind of peace he hadn't felt in decades. But then, something started to change. The days began to blend together. He realized he had no real reason to leave the house if he didn't want to. The invitations from friends started to dwindle, and the phone didn't ring as often. His children checked in now and then, but they were busy, caught up in their own lives. The independence he had once craved now felt eerily close to isolation. It took him a while to admit it, even to himself. But when he found himself staring at the TV one evening, realizing he hadn't spoken a word out loud that entire day, he knew something had to change. That's when he decided to take action. He started by setting small goals, simple ones, taking a daily walk around the neighborhood, not just for exercise, but to see familiar faces, to exchange a few words with neighbors. He made a rule to call one friend every few days, even if he had nothing major to say. And he reached out to a local senior center, where he found a group of people just like him. People who had spent so much time being busy that they never stopped to think about what life would look like when it slowed down. It wasn't about losing independence. It was about recognizing that independence doesn't have to mean isolation. Linda had a similar realization, but hers came in a more unsettling way. She had always been fiercely self-reliant, never one to ask for help, always the one who took care of others. So when she slipped on her icy porch steps one winter morning, she brushed it off. No broken bones, just some bruises and a sore wrist. She told herself it was nothing. But that night, lying awake in bed, she couldn't shake the thought, what if it had been worse? What if no one had found me for hours? She debated telling her son, but the last time she had mentioned a minor health issue, he had overreacted, offering to move her into his home, insisting she should start thinking about the future. She knew what that meant. Less control over her choices. Less say in how she lived her life. Instead, she made her own plan. She researched programs designed for older adults living alone, ones she had never thought about before, because she had never believed she needed them. She found a local organization that provided a simple yet reassuring service, a daily check-in call. Just a quick, hello, a moment of connection, and the comfort of knowing that someone would notice if something was wrong. She also signed up for a transportation program that allowed her to get groceries and go to doctor's appointments without relying on family. And she made an agreement with a friend who lived nearby. They would check in on each other every evening just to make sure everything was okay. It wasn't about giving up her independence. It was about protecting it. There are more resources out there than most people realize. Meal delivery services for days when cooking feels like too much, local volunteers who offer rides to medical appointments, even groups that arrange social gatherings to prevent isolation. But the hardest part isn't finding these services. It's admitting that you might need them. Have you ever held back from asking for help, afraid that it would mean losing a piece of yourself? Have you ever ignored a small problem, hoping it wouldn't turn into something bigger, just because you didn't want to worry your family? That's the delicate balance no one talks about. Living alone doesn't mean doing everything alone. But how do you make sure you stay independent without shutting yourself off? Maybe the answer isn't as complicated as it seems. Maybe it starts with the simplest actions. Keeping a routine, finding small reasons to leave the house, staying connected in ways that feel natural instead of forced. Maybe it's about changing how you see help, not as a sign of weakness, but as a tool for maintaining the life you love. And maybe, just maybe, the smallest changes can make the biggest difference. Let's talk about what those changes could be. Because sometimes the key to staying independent isn't what you hold on to, it's what you're willing to embrace. There's something about a familiar voice that can make a house feel less empty. A knock on the door, a friendly greeting at the grocery store, even a casual conversation with a neighbor while collecting the mail. These moments seem small, but they add up. They remind you that you're still part of something bigger, that the world is still turning, and that you still have a place in it. Mark realized this after a few months of putting himself out there. He had found a rhythm, one that kept him from slipping into isolation. He made it a habit to stop by the coffee shop in town, where the barista always remembered his usual order. He struck up conversations with people at the senior center, found himself lingering a little longer after exercise classes, talking about things that had nothing to do with aging or retirement, just life. One of the best decisions he made was volunteering. He had never thought of himself as a volunteer type, but when he heard about a program that paired retirees with high school students looking for career advice, something clicked. He had spent his whole life working hard, learning lessons, making mistakes, and figuring things out. And now, he had a chance to pass that knowledge along. The first time he sat across from a teenager who was unsure about their future, Mark saw a little bit of himself in that nervous kid. And as they talked, he realized something. Connection wasn't just about what he could get. It was also about what he could give. Linda took a different approach. She had never been one for big social events, but she found comfort in small, dependable interactions. She signed up for a local walking group. Not for the exercise, though that was a nice bonus, but for the easy conversations that came with it. She started attending a weekly cooking class at a community center, where people laughed, shared stories, and exchanged recipes. And she made a promise to herself that she would call an old friend once a week, no matter how much time had passed. These choices weren't grand, but they were intentional. They gave her a sense of structure, a reason to get up in the morning and leave the house. And most importantly, they reminded her that being alone didn't mean being lonely. But staying connected to the world isn't just about having people to talk to. It's also about maintaining control over your own life, making sure that the independence you fought for doesn't slip away. And few things can threaten that independence faster than financial uncertainty. Mark had always been careful with money. He prided himself on living within his means, never spending more than he could afford. But after his wife passed away, he realized just how much of their financial life she had handled. The bills, the budgeting, the little details of managing a household, it was all suddenly on him. He figured he could handle it. After all, he had worked hard his whole life. But as time went on, he started feeling a creeping anxiety. Prices were going up, medical bills were unpredictable, and even small financial decisions felt heavier when there was no one to talk them through. One day, his daughter called and casually asked how he was doing financially. He hesitated. He trusted her, but had also heard stories. Stories about parents who shared too much, only to find themselves pressured into making decisions they weren't ready for. He didn't want that. He didn't want her to worry, and he didn't want her to think his savings were an open discussion. So he took a step back and found another solution. He reached out to a financial advisor at a local nonprofit that helped seniors manage their money. They walked him through everything: how to organize his bills, how to plan for unexpected expenses, even how to make sure his will and estate were in order. It wasn't about giving up control. It was about making sure he had a plan in place so that no one else had to step in and take over. Linda faced a different challenge. She had always been independent with her finances, but after a conversation with a friend who had been scammed, she started second-guessing things. She had never worried about fraud before, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized how vulnerable people could be, especially when they lived alone. She took action right away, attending a community workshop on financial security, setting up alerts on her bank account, and making a rule for herself. Any big financial decision would be discussed with someone she trusted before she made a move. Not because she couldn't handle it on her own, but because having a second opinion was just smart. Money is a tricky subject. It's deeply personal, and talking about it can feel uncomfortable. But staying silent about finances can be just as dangerous as oversharing. Finding that middle ground, having a plan, knowing who to trust, and keeping control without isolating yourself is one of the hardest balances to strike. And the truth is, financial security and social connection go hand in hand. When you're worried about money, it's easy to withdraw, to say no to opportunities that cost even a little. But when you feel secure, you're more willing to go out, to join that class, to meet up with a friend for coffee. The ability to stay engaged with life often comes down to having the peace of mind that your future is stable. Living alone comes with so many choices, and each one shapes the kind of life you lead. The good news is that independence isn't about doing everything by yourself. It's about making sure you have the right tools, the right people, and the right mindset to build a life that still feels full. And that fullness starts with the little things, like knowing how to protect your space, your time, and your decisions. But how do you make sure your independence is truly yours, not just in your finances, but in every part of your life? Let's explore that next. Because keeping control of your future doesn't mean closing yourself off. It means making choices today that ensure you have freedom tomorrow. Independence is something we fight for, something we build over a lifetime. And yet, as the years pass, it can start to feel like sand slipping through our fingers. Not because we're any less capable, but because the world seems eager to take decisions out of our hands. The people who love us most offer suggestions, advice, sometimes even ultimatums, all in the name of care. But care and control are two different things, and it's a difficult dance to navigate. Linda had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together, who made the decisions, who never needed permission to live life on her own terms. But recently, she had begun to notice a shift in the way her children spoke to her. Their words were gentle, their tone kind, but there was something else beneath the surface. An assumption that she needed guidance, that she wasn't quite as in charge of her own life as she once had been. "You shouldn't be living alone, Mom," her son had said one evening, a statement disguised as concern. What if something happens? What if? That was the question that sat in the back of her mind at night, in the quiet hours when the house felt too still, when the weight of time pressed against her chest. It wasn't that she was afraid of being alone. She had always valued her solitude. But there were moments when the silence carried a different kind of presence, when it felt less like peace and more like something closing in. Fear has a way of creeping in when no one else is around to challenge it. Doubts whisper louder when they have no opposition. What if I fall? What if I forget something important? What if one day I wake up and realize that I'm not as strong as I thought? Linda didn't want to live in fear, and she certainly didn't want to hand over her independence just to silence the worries of others. So instead, she made a plan, not just for her safety, but for her confidence. She installed a medical alert system, not because she expected to use it, but because knowing it was there made her feel in control. She hired a part-time housekeeper, not because she couldn't manage, but because it gave her the freedom to focus on the things she enjoyed instead of exhausting herself with chores. She even set up a regular schedule for checking in with a close friend, someone who understood her desire to maintain her autonomy without questioning it. These weren't signs of weakness. They were acts of agency. Mark understood that feeling well. He had spent his entire life making his own way, carving out a path with hard work and careful planning. But no amount of preparation could fully erase the uncertainties of aging. He had seen friends blindsided by unexpected medical bills, watched as others struggled with legal matters they had never anticipated. It wasn't just about the physical side of growing older. It was the weight of decisions that still needed to be made, even when you were tired of making them. He knew he had two choices. He could ignore the future and let others make those choices for him when the time came, or he could face it head-on, while he was still the one in charge. So, he started with the hardest part, his finances. He met with a financial advisor, reviewed his will, made sure his money was structured in a way that no one would have to scramble to figure things out if something ever happened. He updated his power of attorney, choosing someone he trusted to follow his wishes, not override them. And then he did something even harder. He sat down with his son and had an honest conversation. "I know you worry about me," he said, "and I appreciate that. But I need you to understand, I have a plan. I'm not waiting for things to fall apart. I'm making sure they don't." That conversation changed everything. His son still checked in, still asked questions, but there was a shift. The calls weren't filled with subtle pressures to let someone else handle things. They were just conversations, the way they used to be, because when people see that you're not avoiding the realities of aging but actively shaping them, they stop treating you like a fragile version of yourself. The truth is, living alone means carrying more than just the weight of daily life. It means carrying the full responsibility of your own future, of your safety, your well-being, your happiness. And some days, that weight feels heavier than others. Some nights, the silence feels deeper. But control isn't about eliminating every risk, every fear. It's about having a say in how you handle them. Linda still has moments when doubt creeps in. There are nights when the shadows in her home feel bigger than they are, when she wonders if one day she'll look back and wish she had accepted her children's offers. But then she remembers the feeling of waking up in her own home, making her own choices, deciding her own schedule. She remembers the power of knowing she is choosing this life, not just clinging to it. Mark still worries about the unknowns, the things no one can fully plan for. But he also knows that every step he's taken has ensured that, no matter what happens, the decisions will always be his. That's what independence truly is. Not resisting help out of pride. Not ignoring the realities of aging out of fear, but making choices today that ensure freedom tomorrow. Because the real secret to staying independent isn't just about what you hold on to, it's about what you prepare for. And sometimes, the smallest steps toward planning for the future are the ones that make you feel the most in control. Life has a way of changing when we least expect it. One day, we wake up and realize that the world we once knew, the routines, the voices, the constant movement has quieted. The house that was once full of noise and responsibilities is now still. And in that stillness, we're left with the question, what do I do with this next chapter? Some people will tell you that aging is about letting go, about accepting that certain things are no longer possible. But that's not the full story. The truth is, growing older isn't about what you lose. It's about what you choose. The choice to embrace change rather than fear it. The choice to build a life that feels full, not just familiar. The choice to take control, even when the world assumes you can't. Mark didn't expect to find new purpose after retirement, but he did. He discovered that independence wasn't just about doing everything alone. It was about knowing where to place his energy. When he started sharing his knowledge with younger generations, something changed. He saw that the value of a life well lived wasn't in how long he had managed on his own, but in what he still had to offer. Linda, in her quiet way, found her own strength by making small but powerful decisions. She no longer waited for life to come knocking. She opened the door herself, whether it was through reconnecting with old friends, reshaping her home to better fit her needs, or simply deciding every morning to get up and greet the day with purpose. She proved to herself that independence wasn't just about where she lived. It was about how she lived. And that's what this all comes down to. Living alone isn't about being alone. It isn't about proving something to anyone else. It's about deciding what kind of life you want to live and making sure that every single day you take steps, no matter how small, to create it. It's about recognizing that independence doesn't mean isolation, and that accepting support doesn't mean surrendering control. There will always be people who assume they know what's best for you. There will always be moments when doubt sneaks in, when the unknown feels overwhelming. But the power to shape your future, to make your own choices, to build a life that reflects who you are, that power has always belonged to you. So ask yourself, what kind of life do you want to live? What are the things that bring you joy? The things that make you feel truly alive? What steps, big or small, can you take today to make sure that tomorrow is one you look forward to? And if you've been on this journey, if you found your own ways to stay independent, to stay connected, to carve out a life that is yours, share your story. Because someone out there might need to hear it. Someone might be sitting in a quiet house right now, wondering what comes next, searching for a sign that they're not alone in this. Maybe that sign is you. Maybe your experience, your wisdom, your voice is exactly what someone else needs. So let's talk. Let's create a space where we lift each other up, where independence isn't something to fear losing, but something to celebrate having. Because this next chapter, it's still yours to write.